Commanders fans, you won't believe what's happening right now. Adam Peters just proved why he's the GM we needed, but also why some moves are stirring more controversy than we expected. Today, we have 3 explosive stories that will completely change how you see this team. First, the most controversial contract of the season that has half the country talking and could define whether Peters truly knows what he's doing. Second, an internal battle that could dethrone our second-round draft pick and expose deeper issues in our talent evaluation. And third, a situation that will literally determine if we make the playoffs or watch from home, involving a player at the most critical crossroads of his career. If you thought the offseason would be dull, you're out of your minds. What's happening now in Ashbourne will shape the next 5 years of this franchise. Stay until the end, because what's coming will blow your minds and completely change how you see the future of this team. Look, I get why some of you are nervous about Giovon Kinlaw's contract. $15 million per year for 3 years for a player with 9.5 sacks in 5 seasons. When you hear those numbers, I completely understand why you're worried. But you know what I tell you? You're looking at the wrong numbers and losing the big picture. Let's dive into this because the criticism goes way beyond what you're seeing on the surface. Lou Scattaglia from NFL Spin Zone wasn't the only critical. Voice, ESPN, Pro Football Talk, and multiple national analysts have pegged this contract as one of the worst off-season moves. I'm here to tell you why they're completely wrong. First, let's contextualize this $15 million per year. Do you know how much Chris Jones is making in Kansas City? $31 million per year. Aaron Donald before retiring, $23 million. Quinnen Williams with the Jets, $24 million. Kinlaw is making less than half of what the elite defensive tackles earn. But here's the most important thing no one is discussing. Adam Peters knows this player better than any other GM in the league because he was part of the San Francisco office that drafted him 14th overall in 2020. Do you think Peters would bet $45 million over 3 years without having insider info that we don't? I say definitely not. This man transformed our franchise in a single year. He took us from being the league's laughingstock to winning a division and making the playoffs. He turned Jaden Daniels into Rookie of the Year, built a defense no one expected, and now supposedly can't evaluate defensive talent. Let's talk about what really happened in San Francisco. Kinlaw was drafted to replace DeForest Buckner, who had been traded to Indianapolis. The pressure was immense. He had to fill the shoes of an established Pro Bowler and dealt with multiple injuries in his first 3 seasons. But do you know what happened when he was finally healthy in New York? Last season was Kinlaw's most productive in the NFL. 4.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 23 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and for the first time in his career, he played all 17 games as a starter. And this is crucial. Availability is the best ability in the NFL, and Kinlaw finally demonstrated he can stay on the field for a full season. But here's what critics are completely ignoring. Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. have repeatedly shown they can maximize defensive talent in ways other coordinators simply can't. Remember when everyone said Frankie Louvu was a risky bet? A linebacker from Carolina who had never been more than a rotational player. Look at him now. All-Pro, defense leader, the heart and soul of our front seven. Or when they criticized the signing of Dante Fowler Jr., he's done, they said. He lacks explosiveness, they said. He finished with 8.5 sacks and was crucial for our pass rush. And what about Jeremy Chin? Everyone thought he was a washed safety after his issues in Carolina. Quinn moved him to linebacker, gave him a specific role in our system, and he had the best season of his professional career. The pattern is crystal clear. This coaching staff knows exactly how to use players other teams have underestimated or misused, and Kinlaw fits perfectly in that profile. Let's go deeper. Do you know why the Jets let him go? It wasn't due to production or ability. It was because they're in rebuilding mode and didn't want to pay a 28-year-old player when they're focusing on young players. That's exactly the opportunity Peters identified. Additionally, let's analyze the situation from the team's needs perspective. We needed to replace Jonathan Allen, who left as a free agent. What were our options? We could have tried replacing him in the draft, but at what cost? The best defensive tackles were selected in the first round, and we'd have had to trade multiple picks to move up and select one. And even then, there was no guarantee that rookie could contribute immediately. Do you remember rookie defensive tackle stats in their first season? Most struggle to adapt to the professional game. Kinlaw has already passed that learning curve. Also, consider the context of the current market. $15 million per year for a defensive tackle in 2025 isn't crazy. Salary cap inflation has made these numbers the new normal. Do you remember when we thought $10 million per year was a lot for a defensive tackle? That was 5 years ago. Here's something Luz Cataglia and other critics aren't considering. This contract has structure. It's not $15 million guaranteed each year. There are performance incentives, team outs if he doesn't produce, and it's structured in a way that protects the organization. Peters isn't foolish. He knows he's gambling, but it's a calculated bet based on specific information about the player, the system, and team needs. And I trust that evaluation. Look, if Kinlaw fails, I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. But based on everything we've seen from Peters, Quinn, and this coaching staff, I firmly believe they're going to maximize his talent in ways other teams couldn't. If you thought that controversy was intense, wait until you hear what's happening in our tight ends room, because there's a battle that could completely change our future plans. I can't believe what's happening with Coulson Yankov. And when I say I can't believe it, it's because this situation is exposing much deeper problems in our talent evaluation and young player development. This undrafted free agent from 2024 is making such an impression in the off-season program that the coaches want to incorporate him into the passing game. And that, my friends, is a huge problem for Ben Sinnott and our entire development strategy. Let's start from the beginning, because this story is much more complicated than it seems on the surface. Do you remember when we picked Sinnott in the second round last year? Picked number 53 overall. We all thought he was the future of the position, the heir apparent to Zach Ertz, the cornerstone of our offensive future. The scouting reports were incredible. 6'4", 245 pounds, a perfect mix of size, speed, and hands. At Kansas State, he was twice first-team All-Big 12. In his last college season, he had 73 receptions for 916 yards and 10 touchdowns. Those are elite college tight end numbers. But then came the NFL reality, and everything fell apart. 5 receptions for 28 yards and 1 touchdown in his entire rookie season. 5 receptions. To put it in perspective, there are wide receivers who have 5 receptions in a single drive. And do you know what's most concerning? It wasn't just that he didn't produce statistically. It was that he looked lost on the field. Routes weren't crisp. Timing with Jaden Daniels never developed. And in an offensive system that uses multiple tight end formations, Sinnott couldn't find his place. Cliff Kingsbury clearly preferred using Zach Ertz as the primary receiving threat and John Bates as the blocking specialist. Sinnott was in limbo, with no specific role, trying to find snaps where he could contribute, and he clearly didn't. But here's the part that really worries me. While Sinnott struggled, Coulson Yankov was watching, learning, and developing quietly. Yankov came as an undrafted free agent from Virginia Tech, 6'3", 230 pounds. Didn't have Sinnott's pedigree, but had something our second-round pick apparently didn't: adaptability. Last year, Yankov earned a roster spot mainly through his contribution on special teams. He played just 6 offensive snaps in the entire regular season, spent time on injured reserve, but returned for the playoffs and showed flashes of what he could do. But do you know what's happening now in the off-season program? Internal reports indicate Yankov is showing up in ways Sinnott never did. His route running has dramatically improved. His chemistry with the quarterbacks is developing naturally. And most importantly, he's displaying the football IQ you need to survive at this level. Dan Quinn publicly praised Sinnott for his work ethic during the offseason, and I know some fans see that as positive, but I'm telling you that's a huge red flag. When a coach talks about work ethic instead of production or improvement, it's because there are serious problems in coach speak. When they say, he's working hard, what they really mean is, we hope hard work will eventually translate into results, because so far we haven't seen them. It's a diplomatic way of saying you're disappointed. And here's the brutal reality of NFL roster management. Most teams keep only 3 tight ends on the active roster. Some years we keep 4 if there are injuries or specific needs, but 3 is the standard. And right now, those 3 spots seem taken by Zach Ertz, John Bates, and who? Ertz is obviously untouchable. 3-time Pro Bowler, veteran leadership, and had an excellent season last year after re-signing with us. His experience and reliability make him key for Jaden Daniels' development. Bates also seems safe, not just for his elite-level blocking ability, but because he earned a long-term commitment from the franchise. Peters clearly sees Bates as part of the team core, and his versatility as both blocker and occasional receiver makes him valuable. That leaves Sinnott and Yankov competing for one spot, and based on current reports, Yankov is winning that battle. But do you understand the broader implications of this situation? If Sinnott doesn't make the roster, or if he ends up as the 4th tight end without significant playing time, we'd be seeing a second-round pick basically busting before his second season. That would be devastating for Peters' talent evaluation. And it's not just about Sinnott individually. It's about our entire approach to drafting and developing young players. If we can't successfully develop a second-round tight end with good college production, what does that say about our coaching and development system? Also, consider the cost of opportunity. That 53rd pick we used on Sinnott could have been spent on other positions of need. We could have picked a defensive back, an offensive lineman, or any other position where we really needed depth. But here's something that gives me hope, and it's that this competition could be exactly what Sinnott needs. Sometimes players need that fire under them to reach their potential. Seeing Yankov threatening his position could be the wake-up call that motivates him to finally put everything together. Reports indicate Sinnott is responding positively to this challenge. He's spending extra time with coaches, working on his route precision, and trying to develop better chemistry with quarterbacks. But the question is, will IT be enough? Because Yankov isn't waiting. He's continuing to improve, continuing to show that adaptability that allows you to survive as an undrafted free agent. He has that underdog mentality that sometimes translates better at the professional level than the pedigree of draft picks. And this leads me to a broader reflection on draft evaluation. How many times have we seen undrafted free agents outperform high picks? Antonio Gates was never drafted. Jason Peters was undrafted. Arian Foster was undrafted. History is full of these examples. Maybe Yankov is one of those diamonds in the rough that Peters identified. Maybe our scouts saw something in him that other teams miss. And maybe this competition will bring out the best in both players. But it's also possible that Sinnott simply doesn't have what IT takes to be successful. At this level, if that internal battle has you worried, what's next will literally determine if we're true contenders or just got lucky last year. Commanders fans, this goes far beyond a player trying to regain form. What's happening with Marshon Lattimore is literally a life or death situation for our playoff aspirations. And it's the most important story we'll discuss today because the consequences will impact the next 3 to 5 years of this franchise. Dalton Wasserman from Pro Football Focus just dropped a nuclear bomb that we all need not only to hear, but to fully understand in its broader context. Our cornerbacks were dead last in coverage grade last season. Not second worst, not among the worst 5, dead last in the entire NFL. To put it in perspective, that means 31 other teams had better coverage from their cornerbacks than we did. This includes teams like Carolina, which were in complete rebuilding mode, and Arizona, which had multiple rookies starting. We were worse than teams that weren't even trying to compete. And here's the part that has me completely devastated. Lattimore, who supposedly came to be our savior, who was going to transform our secondary from worst to respectable, had a coverage grade of 40.7 in just 5 games. 40.7. For context, anything below 50 in PFF grades is considered poor performance. Anything below 40 is considered terrible. But let's dive deeper into the numbers because the situation is worse than it seems. In those 5 games he played with us, Lattimore allowed a completion percentage of 73% when targeted. 73%. That means nearly 3 out of every 4 passes thrown his way were completed. For comparison, elite. Cornerbacks typically allow completion percentages in the 40s. Good cornerbacks are in the 50s. Average cornerbacks are in the 60s. Lattimore was allowing completions at a rate of players who shouldn't even be on an NFL roster. And do you know what worries me most about this whole situation? Lattimore has no guaranteed money in his contract after this season. That means he's literally betting everything on 2025. His financial future, his legacy, his chance. To continue as a starter in the NFL, it all depends on what he does this year. Adam Peters could save $18.5 million by cutting or trading Lattimore after this season. And considering we'll need money to extend Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, and other core players, that temptation will be enormous if Lattimore doesn't perform. But here's something that has me equally worried. If Peters doesn't see significant improvements and decides to move on from Lattimore, what's our plan B? Who will be our number 1 corner? Emmanuel Forbes, who struggled in his rookie season. Benjamin Steedjus, who is more suited to be a 3rd corner. The reality is that good quarterbacks don't grow on trees. Do you see the free agency market for corners? The prices are astronomical. And the draft? Finding an elite corner in the draft is incredibly difficult and takes time to develop. That means we need Lattimore to succeed. It's not just about his individual career. It's about our entire defensive foundation for the next several years. Now, let's talk about the injury situation, because that provides some context for his poor performance. The hamstring injury that limited his explosiveness last year. 4. A corner, explosion, and quick twitch movement are absolutely essential. If you can't change direction quickly, if you can't accelerate out of breaks, you're going to get burned repeatedly. And do you know how brutal hamstring injuries are? For cornerbacks, it's not like other injuries that heal completely and you're back to normal. Hamstring issues can linger, can create compensation patterns that affect other parts of your game, and can create mental hesitation that is equally damaging. But here's what's encouraging. Reports from the mandatory minicamp indicate Lattimore looked re-energized, dynamic, more explosive than he did at any point last season. Players and coaches at practice are saying he looked more like the old Marshon, the version that was considered one of the elite shutdown corners in the league. Lattimore himself said publicly that he feels good and ready to remind the world why. He was considered among the league's most accomplished coverage specialists. And I really want to believe that, because when Lattimore was at his peak in New Orleans, he was absolutely dominant. 4 Pro Bowl selections. Multiple years where opposing teams literally avoided throwing to his side of the field. The type of corner that changes how offensive coordinators game plan. Do you remember his peak seasons? In 2017, opposing quarterbacks had a passer rating of only 47.1 when targeting him. In 2019, he allowed only 35 completions in the entire season while being targeted 79 times. Those are elite numbers. But the question is if that player still exists. He's going into his age 29 season. In corner years, that's getting up there. The combination of age, injuries, and the general wear and tear of playing one of the most physically demanding positions in the NFL. All of that adds up. Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. clearly believe they can get the best out of Lattimore. Quinn, has a history of maximizing veteran defensive backs. Look at what he did with different players throughout his career, which specifically has worked with cornerbacks and understands how to scheme to their strengths. But here's what I think is the most important factor: the pressure. Lattimore knows that this is literally his last chance to prove that he can still play at an elite level. That type of motivation can be incredibly powerful, especially for a player who has that level of talent and experience. The flip side is that pressure can also be paralyzing. Some players thrive under pressure, others crumble. We don't know which version we're going to get from Lattimore until the games start. And consider the division context. The Cowboys still have issues in their secondary after losing some key players. The Eagles have question marks at corner after some roster changes. The Giants are still the Giants, struggling to find consistent playmakers in their defense. This is literally our window. If Lattimore can return to even 75% of his peak form, combined with the improvements we expect in our pass rush and the development of our safeties, we could have one of the most feared defenses in the NFC. But if he continues to struggle, if the hamstring issues persist, if Father Time has caught up to him, then we're looking at potentially missing the playoffs despite having Jaden Daniels entering his second year and a lot of other pieces in place. That's what makes this situation so crucial. Look, Commanders fans, after analyzing these three situations in depth, I want you to understand the magnitude of what we're facing as a fan base and as an organization. With Kinlaw's contract, we're not just talking about $15 million per year. We're talking about Peters' credibility as a talent evaluator, our ability to identify market value, and whether we can continue to build a championship caliber roster through strategic acquisitions. If Kinlaw becomes the impact player Peters expects, it validates not only this specific signing, but also our entire approach to free agency and roster construction. If he fails, it raises serious questions about our front office's decision-making process. The battle between Yankov and Sinnott is about much more than just tight end depth. It's about our drafting philosophy, our player development system, and our ability to maximize young players' potential. A second-round pick struggling to make the roster while an undrafted free agent threatens to surpass him. That's a story that could define how we approach future drafts. And with Marshon Lattimore, we're looking at the foundation of our entire defensive secondary. His success or failure doesn't just impact the corner position. It affects our pass rush because quarterbacks will have more or less time depending on how well he covers. It affects our safeties because they'll need to provide more or less help over the top. It affects our entire defensive game plan. These three stories are interconnected in ways many fans aren't realizing. If Kinlaw provides the pass rush we need, it makes Lattimore's job easier. If Lattimore shuts down one side of the field, it allows Quinn to be more aggressive with blitzes and rotations. If our tight end room gets sorted out with clear roles for everyone, it gives Daniels more reliable targets and makes our offense more unpredictable. But if these situations don't resolve favorably, we could be looking at a cascade effect that impacts every aspect of our team performance. Do you think Peters got it right with Kinlaw's contract? Or was it too much money for a player with his injury history and production concerns? Do you think Sinnott can recover and win the battle against Yankov? Or are we looking at a second-round bust in his second season? Most importantly, what do you think about Lattimore's future? Do you believe he can return to elite form with a full healthy offseason? Or is it time to start looking at other options and preparing for life without him? I want to hear all your thoughts in the comments because this conversation is going to shape how we understand this team's trajectory. If you think Peters is building something special and that these concerns are overblown, smash that like button and let me know why you're optimistic. If you think we need more moves before the season starts, or if you're worried about any of these situations, subscribe to not miss a single update because I guarantee in the coming days we're going to have more explosive news. The roster isn't finalized yet. Training camp hasn't even started, and Peters clearly hasn't finished making moves. There. Are still veteran free agents available, potential trades that could happen, and roster battles that haven't been resolved? You can't miss what's coming because it's going to be absolutely epic. We're not just building a team for 2025. We're establishing the foundation for the next era of Washington. Commanders football. Join this family of true Commanders fans. We're more than a channel. We're a community that lives and breathes burgundy and gold. We analyze every move, debate every decision, and support this team through every high and every low. Subscribe right now and become part of the most important conversation in the DMV. Hit that notification bell so you never miss breaking news. And most importantly, keep that Commander's pride burning strong because our time is coming. Hail to the Commanders!